The morning Marcus Chen turned 16, Earth's sky burned with alien fire. He stood in his family's small apartment on level 47 of New Beijing Tower, watching through the reinforced glass as massive shapes descended through the clouds. The creatures were beautiful and terrible, scales that shimmered like oil on water, wings that could eclipse city blocks, and eyes that glowed with intelligence far older than human civilization. Dragons. Real, living dragons from the depths of space. Marcus pressed his palm against the cool window, his reflection ghost-like against the chaos outside. Below, people ran screaming through the streets as the creatures landed with earth-shaking impacts. Emergency sirens wailed their mechanical songs of panic, but the dragons paid them no attention. They simply folded their wings and waited, as if they had all the time in the universe. Marcus, get away from the window. His mother's voice cracked with fear as she pulled him backward. Sarah Chen worked double shifts at the protein farms to keep their small family fed, and Marcus had never heard such terror in her voice before. "They're not attacking," Marcus said quietly, his dark eyes tracking the movements of the nearest dragon. The creature was easily 200 meters long, its scales shifting from deep purple to silver as it turned its massive head toward their tower. "Look, Mom, they're just waiting." His mother grabbed his shoulders, her fingers digging into his thin frame. "Waiting for what?" Before Marcus could answer, every screen in their apartment flickered to life. The dragons had somehow hijacked every communication device on Earth simultaneously. The image that appeared made Marcus's blood run cold, not from fear but from recognition. A dragon's face filled their screen, but this one was different. Ancient beyond measure, its scales were white as bone, its eyes like molten gold. When it spoke, the voice resonated in frequencies that seemed to reach directly into their minds. "Humans of Earth," the dragon said, its mental voice carrying the weight of millennia. "I am Valthros, speaker for the Dominion. Your species has been selected." Marcus felt his mother's grip tighten, but he couldn't look away from the screen. Something about the dragon's words stirred something deep in his chest, like an echo answering a call he'd never heard. "For 10,000 years, we have searched the stars for those who carry the mark of command. Your species shows potential, but potential alone is insufficient. You will be tested. Those who prove worthy will join the Dominion as equals. Those who do not—" The dragon's pause stretched like eternity. "Will serve until they learn." The transmission ended, leaving their apartment in oppressive silence, broken only by the distant sounds of panic from the streets below. Marcus's mother was crying now, quiet tears that she tried to hide from him. But Marcus felt something else entirely. As the dragon had spoken, something had awakened in his mind. A presence that felt both foreign and familiar, like remembering a dream from childhood. It whispered to him in languages he didn't know but somehow understood. "The testing begins now." Valthros's voice echoed one final time through every speaker on Earth. "Those who hear the call will know what to do." Marcus gasped as fire erupted behind his eyes. Not pain, but power, raw and untamed, surging through his nervous system like lightning through copper wire. Images flashed through his mind. Distant worlds where humans worked alongside dragons, building cities that touched the stars. Battles fought in the void between galaxies. And always, always the feeling of wind beneath wings he didn't possess. When the visions faded, Marcus found himself on his knees, his mother kneeling beside him with panic written across her face. But he wasn't hurt. If anything, he felt more alive than ever before. "I can hear them," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Mom, I can hear them in my head." Outside their window, the purple-scaled dragon that had been waiting turned its massive head directly toward their tower. Its eyes, each larger than Marcus's entire body, focused on their apartment with laser precision. Then impossibly it smiled, a predator's grin full of teeth like ivory swords. Marcus stood on unsteady legs and walked back to the window. The dragon's mental voice came to him clearly now, no longer filtered through speakers but speaking directly to the new presence that had awakened in his mind. "Young one," the dragon's thoughts whispered, "you carry the spark. But sparks must be tended carefully or they consume everything they touch. What do you want from me?" Marcus thought back, surprised that he knew how to project his thoughts. "Everything," came the reply, "and nothing. The choice is yours, Marcus Chen. You can hide in this tower until we collect you for processing, or you can come willingly and learn what you truly are." Marcus looked back at his mother, who was watching him with a mixture of love and terror. He thought about his life, school tomorrow if there still was school, his job at the recycling center, the girl in his chemistry class who smiled at him sometimes. All of it seemed suddenly small, like a picture viewed from very far away. If I go with you, he thought to the dragon, what happens to my family? The dragon's mental laughter was like distant thunder, humans who think first of others before themselves. How unusual. Your family will be protected, young one. We have no interest in harming those who matter to our chosen. Marcus placed his hand against the window again. This time he could swear he felt heat radiating from the dragon's scales, even through the glass and the hundreds of meters between them. I need to say goodbye, he thought. You have 1 hour, the dragon replied. Then we begin your real education. As if responding to some unheard signal, every dragon in the city lifted off simultaneously, their massive wings beating in perfect synchronization as they rose toward the clouds. Only Marcus's dragon remained, settling into the plaza below their tower like a living mountain. Marcus turned to his mother, who had heard none of the mental conversation, but had watched every expression cross his face. She knew without being told that everything was about to change. You're leaving, aren't you? She whispered. Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. The presence in his mind was growing stronger, showing him glimpses of what awaited beyond Earth's atmosphere. Adventures among the stars, yes, but also responsibilities he couldn't yet comprehend. I don't have a choice, Mom, he said finally. But I think this is what I was meant for. Outside, his dragon waited with the patience of stone, and Marcus began to understand that his childhood had just ended forever. The dragon's scales felt warm beneath Marcus's palm as he climbed onto its neck. Each scale was larger than his hand, smooth as polished metal but somehow yielding to his touch. The creature's name came to him without words. Sci-Fi, the Stormwing, older than human civilization but young by dragon standards. Do not fear the height, Sci-Fi's mental voice rumbled through Marcus's consciousness as they rose from the plaza. Fear only that you might not be worthy of it. Marcus had expected terror as they climbed above the city, but instead felt only wonder. New Beijing spread below them like a circuit board, its towers reaching toward the clouds where more dragons circled in complex patterns. Other humans rode some of them, teenagers like himself, all wearing the same expression of bewildered awe. Where are we going? Marcus asked, his thoughts growing clearer as the mental connection strengthened. To the academy, Sci-Fi replied, though your kind will know it by a different name before long. They flew beyond Earth's atmosphere faster than should have been possible, the dragon's wings somehow catching currents that existed in the vacuum of space itself. Marcus should have died from exposure, but a shimmering field surrounded them, keeping him alive and breathing while the stars wheeled overhead. The academy hung in space like a crystal flower, its transparent walls revealing vast chambers where dragons and humans moved together in purposeful activity. As they approached, Marcus could see other transport dragons arriving from Earth, each carrying a human teenager who glowed with the same inner fire he felt burning in his chest. How many of us are there? Marcus wondered aloud. From your world? Perhaps 50 who carry strong sparks, Sci-Fi answered. From all worlds we have tested millions. But carrying the spark and mastering it are different things entirely. They landed in a bay that adjusted its gravity to accommodate them, the floor rising to meet Sci-Fi's feet while atmospheric processors hummed to life. Marcus dismounted on legs that shook only slightly, proud that he hadn't embarrassed himself during the flight. The other humans were already gathering in the center of the bay, and Marcus was struck by how young they all looked. Most appeared to be between 15 and 18, though one girl who couldn't have been older than 12 stood among them with confidence that seemed far beyond her years. Welcome, Spark Carriers. A new voice echoed through the bay. The dragon who emerged from the far wall was smaller than the others Marcus had seen, but something about its presence made the air itself seem to thicken with attention. Its scales were deep gold, and its eyes held the weight of absolute authority. I am Thessarian, commander of this academy. You have been brought here because you possess something extraordinary. The ability to form true mental bonds with dragonkind. This makes you incredibly valuable and incredibly dangerous. Marcus felt the other teenagers shifting nervously around him. The 12-year-old girl, however, stepped forward boldly. Dangerous to who? She asked, her voice clear and unafraid. Thessarian's gaze fixed on her, and Marcus saw approval flicker in the ancient eyes. To yourselves, young one. To your families. To entire star systems if you lack the wisdom to control what you carry. The dragon's mental voice expanded to address them all simultaneously. The spark you feel burning within you is not a gift, it is a responsibility. When fully awakened, it will allow you to command dragons with a thought, to bend our will to your purposes. In the wrong hands, such power has destroyed civilizations. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the artificial atmosphere. You're saying we could control you? Not could, Marcus Chen. The Sarian replied, somehow knowing his name without being told. Will. The bond between human and dragon is unlike anything else in the galaxy. When complete, we become extensions of each other's will. Your thoughts become our actions. Your desires become our purpose. Another teenager, a tall boy with sandy hair, raised his hand tentatively. Then why teach us at all? Why not just keep us contained somewhere safe? Thessarian's mental laughter was like the rumble of distant avalanches. Because the galaxy needs us, young human. And we need you. The wall behind the dragon shimmered and became transparent, revealing the depths of space beyond. But it wasn't empty space. Lights moved in the darkness, vast shapes that hurt to look at directly. The Devourers have awakened, Thessarian continued, and Marcus felt terror radiate from every dragon present. Ancient enemies that consume entire systems, leaving nothing but cold void behind. They return every 10,000 years, and each time they grow stronger. Marcus stared at the writhing shadows beyond the wall, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The shapes seemed to shift between dimensions, present and absent simultaneously. Your species is not the first we have found with the spark, Thessarian explained, but you are the most compatible. Other races could bond with us, yes, but the connection was limited. With humans, the bond becomes something new, a fusion of minds that multiplies our strength exponentially. The 12-year-old girl spoke again, her voice thoughtful. You're preparing for war. We are preparing for survival, Thessarian corrected. The last time the Devourers came, we barely held them back. This time, they will be ready for our strategies. We need weapons they cannot anticipate. Marcus felt the spark in his chest pulse stronger as understanding dawned. We're the weapons. You are evolution, Thessarian replied. The next step in what both our species can become. Over the following hours, they were introduced to the Academy's routine. The complex was larger than it appeared from outside, with chambers dedicated to every aspect of dragon-human integration. Marcus found himself assigned to a dormitory with 5 other humans, including the fearless girl who introduced herself as Luna Okafor. 12 years old and already the bravest person here, Marcus said as they explored their shared quarters. Luna shrugged, her dark eyes serious beyond her years. My grandmother always said fear is just excitement wearing the wrong clothes. Besides, did you see those things in space? I'd rather be learning to fight them than hiding on Earth pretending they don't exist. Their first instructor was a dragon called Nethys, whose scales shifted color with her emotions, currently a nervous purple that made Marcus feel seasick just looking at her. Human minds work differently than ours, Nethys explained as they gathered in a circular chamber lined with crystal formations. You think in linear patterns while we experience time as a fluid concept. You focus intensely on single thoughts while we maintain awareness of multiple probability streams simultaneously. She gestured with one massive claw toward the crystals around them. These formations will help bridge that gap. They amplify and translate thought patterns, making true mental fusion possible. Marcus approached one of the crystals and felt it warm at his touch. Images flashed through his mind. Glimpses of dragon memories stretching back millennia. The feeling of soaring through nebulae. The satisfaction of perfectly timed combat maneuvers. Careful, Nethys warned. Too much too quickly can fracture human consciousness. We have learned this through unfortunate experience. But Marcus found he could handle more than expected. The crystal showed him how dragons perceived reality, not as a sequence of moments but as a vast web of interconnected possibilities. He began to understand how they could anticipate enemy movements, how they planned battles across multiple timelines simultaneously. When he opened his eyes, the other students were staring at him in amazement. He had been connected to the crystal for over an hour, though it felt like minutes. Remarkable, Nethys murmured, her scales shifting to an impressed gold. Most humans require weeks of conditioning before they can maintain contact for more than a few minutes. Luna stepped up to another crystal, her jaw set with determination. Show me what he saw, she demanded. As she touched the crystal, Marcus felt their minds briefly connect through the network. For just an instant he experienced reality through her perspective, sharper, more focused than his own, with an underlying current of protective fury that made him step back in surprise. This girl wasn't just brave. She was angry, and that anger burned with the focused intensity of a star. That night, as Marcus lay in his bunk listening to the distant conversations between dragons echoing through the academy's walls, he began to understand what they were really being trained for. The mental exercises, the bond formations, the gradual awakening of their spark. It was all leading toward something much larger than individual partnerships with dragons. They were being prepared to become generals in a war that would determine the fate of entire galaxies. And somehow a 16-year-old boy from Earth was expected to help lead it. Outside his window, the void between stars seemed to pulse with malevolent awareness, and Marcus fell asleep to dreams of shadows that devoured light itself. 3 months into his training at the academy, Marcus learned that bonding with a dragon could kill you in ways that left your body perfectly intact. He discovered this watching Elena Vasquez writhe on the crystal platform, her body convulsing as her mind tried to process the torrent of draconic consciousness flooding through her nervous system. Her dragon partner, a young bronze called Kelthera, was equally distressed, thrashing in the restraint field as their mental connection spiraled into chaos. "Disconnect them," Luna shouted from across the training chamber. But Instructor Vorthak shook his massive head. "If we sever the bond now, both will be damaged permanently," the ancient dragon rumbled. "They must find their own way through the storm." Marcus felt the familiar fire building in his chest as he watched Elena suffer. Without conscious thought, he placed his hand on the nearest crystal and sent his consciousness diving into the chaotic mental space, where human and dragon minds were tearing each other apart. The psychic landscape was a nightmare of conflicting thoughts and memories. Elena's human linear thinking was trying to process 10,000 years of dragon experience simultaneously, while Kelthera's vast multidimensional awareness was being compressed into a human brain not designed to contain it. Marcus found Elena's consciousness first, a bright point of terror and confusion lost in an ocean of alien thought. He wrapped his own mental presence around hers like a shield, filtering the overwhelming flood of draconic memory into manageable streams. "Focus on my voice," he projected to her. "Remember who you are. Elena Vasquez, age 17, from Mexico City. You have a sister named Carmen who collects butterfly stickers." The personal details acted like anchor points, helping Elena reconstruct her sense of self. But Marcus could feel the bond still pulling her toward complete dissolution. He needed to approach this differently. Instead of fighting the connection, Marcus let his consciousness expand to encompass both Elena and Kelthera. For a terrifying moment, he felt his own identity begin to fracture, as 3 minds tried to occupy the same mental space. But then something clicked into place, a resonance pattern he'd never experienced before. Suddenly, he wasn't fighting the draconic memories, but conducting them, organizing the chaotic flood into something Elena's human mind could process gradually. He became a translator between species, parsing dragon concepts into human understanding while maintaining the essential meaning. The process felt like holding lightning in his bare hands, but slowly, carefully, he guided both minds back to stability. When he finally withdrew his consciousness, Elena was sitting up on the platform, tears streaming down her face but very much alive. Kelthera was equally shaken but intact, her bronze scales still rippling with residual energy. The dragon looked at Marcus with something approaching awe. "What you just did," Instructor Vorthak said quietly, "should have been impossible for a human with only 3 months of training." Marcus slumped against a nearby crystal, exhausted but oddly exhilarated. It felt natural, he admitted, like conducting music but with minds instead of instruments. Luna helped him to his feet, her dark eyes bright with concern. "You could have died in there." Elena and Kelthera weren't the only ones at risk. Before Marcus could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the academy. The chamber's walls became transparent, showing space beyond, and Marcus's blood turned to ice. The void between stars was no longer empty. Massive shapes moved in the darkness, things that hurt to look at directly, beings that seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time. The Devourers had found them. "All students to the central chamber, immediately," Thessarian's mental voice echoed through every dragon's mind simultaneously. This is not a drill. They ran through corridors that were already shifting configuration as the Academy prepared for battle. Dragons moved with urgent purpose, their scales glowing with stored energy while their human partners checked equipment and synchronized mental links. The central chamber had become a war room, its walls displaying tactical information that Marcus's enhanced consciousness could now interpret. The Academy wasn't just a school, it was a fortress, armed with weapons that operated on principles his human brain could barely grasp. The scouts found us sooner than expected, Thessarian announced as students and instructors gathered. The Devourer advance fleet will reach this system in approximately 6 hours. Marcus felt the temperature drop as every human present processed this information. 6 hours before creatures that could consume entire star systems arrived at their location. "Are we evacuating?" asked David, the sandy-haired boy from their first day. "There is nowhere to run," Thessarian replied grimly. "The Devourers can follow quantum signatures across galactic distances. If we flee, we only delay the inevitable while revealing our capabilities to their scouts." Luna stepped forward, her young face set with grim determination. "Then we fight." "You are students," protested Cyrathan, Marcus's original transport dragon. "Your training is incomplete." "Our training will never be complete if we're dead," Luna shot back. "Besides, didn't you say we were weapons against something they couldn't anticipate? Now's the time to prove it." Marcus felt the spark in his chest responding to Luna's fierce determination. Around the chamber, other students were having similar reactions. The mental fires that marked their bond potential were growing brighter, resonating with each other in patterns the dragons had never seen before. "She's right," Marcus said, surprising himself with the authority in his voice. "We may be incomplete, but we're also something new. The Devourers have faced trained dragon-human pairs before, but never spontaneous bonds formed under extreme stress." Thessarian's golden eyes fixed on him with laser intensity. "What are you suggesting, young human?" Marcus looked around at his fellow students. Helena still shaky from her near dissolution, David trying to hide his terror, Luna practically vibrating with eagerness for battle, and dozens of others who had been ordinary teenagers just months ago. "Emergency bonding," Marcus said. "Not the careful, controlled process we've been learning, but immediate battlefield connections. The chaos might actually work in our favor. Devourers expect ordered, predictable responses. That could kill half of you," Instructor Vorthak warned. "The mental trauma of forced bonding under combat conditions will be less traumatic than being consumed by entities from outside reality," Luna interrupted. "Marcus is right. We need to be unpredictable." The debate that followed was conducted at the speed of thought, with dragons and humans exchanging ideas through direct mental contact faster than speech could convey. Marcus found himself at the center of the discussion, his mind somehow able to process and translate between multiple consciousness types simultaneously. In the end, it was Elena who settled the matter. Still pale from her earlier ordeal, she walked to the nearest unbonded dragon, a massive crimson veteran called Thokrunas, and placed her hand on his snout. "I volunteer," she said simply. "If Marcus can help others the way he helped me, then maybe we can make this work." One by one, other students stepped forward. Not all of them. Several chose to remain in supporting roles, and Marcus respected their decision. But more than half of the human trainees committed to attempting emergency battlefield bonds. As the Devourer fleet drew closer, the Academy transformed around them. Corridors became launch bays, training chambers became armories, and the peaceful learning environment became a military installation preparing for war against entities that existed partially outside the normal universe. Marcus found himself assigned to coordinate the emergency bonding process, his unique ability to stabilize chaotic mental connections making him invaluable, despite his inexperience. As he worked with pair after pair, helping human and dragon minds find harmony in the midst of pre-battle stress, he began to understand something fundamental about his role in the coming conflict. He wasn't just a weapon against the Devourers. He was something new, a bridge between species that could forge connections faster and stronger than anyone had thought possible. In a universe where the enemy's greatest strength was their alienness, their complete incompatibility with normal space-time, Marcus was becoming something equally alien from the other direction. He was becoming human enough to understand individual courage and determination, but draconic enough to think on cosmic scales. And as the first Devourer ships began to shimmer into normal space at the edge of the system, Marcus realized that this combination might be exactly what the galaxy needed. The Academy's defensive weapons came online with a sound like reality tearing, and Marcus Chen prepared to discover whether a 16-year-old boy from Earth could help save the universe from hungry darkness between the stars. Outside the Academy's walls, the void writhed with malevolent intelligence and the war for existence began. The first Devourer probe ship materialized like a wound in space itself, its impossible geometry causing Marcus's enhanced perception to recoil in instinctive revulsion. The creature, for it was alive after a fashion, existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its tendrils reaching through space-time in ways that made geometry itself seem insufficient. "Contact in 30 seconds. Announced the Sarian as the Academy's defense grid powered up. All bonded pairs to launch positions. Marcus felt his stomach drop as he realized the implications. He had spent the last 2 hours helping others form emergency bonds, but he himself remained unbonded. Sirathan, his original transport, was assigned to Academy defense rather than individual combat. "You cannot participate in the battle without a dragon partner," Instructor Vorthak rumbled, his scales shifting to worried purple. "And all available dragons are already assigned." Luna appeared at Marcus's side, her new bond with the fierce silver dragon Astrith shimmering visibly around them like heat haze. "Then assign him to multiple dragons," she said. "We've all seen what he can do with mental connections." Before anyone could object, the probe ship fired its first weapon. The blast wasn't energy or matter, but something far worse. A wave of anti-existence that caused portions of the Academy's outer hull to simply stop being. Emergency systems immediately began rerouting around the affected areas, but Marcus could feel the Academy's pain through the network of bonded minds. "Emergency launch," the Sarian commanded. "Defend the Academy at all costs." Dragon-human pairs streamed from the launch bays like living missiles, their mental bonds creating trails of visible energy in the vacuum. Marcus watched through the Academy's sensors as Luna and Astrith engaged the probe ship, their combined consciousness allowing impossible maneuvers that bent physics around their determination to survive. But something was wrong. The emergency bonds forged in haste and desperation were unstable under combat stress. Marcus could feel them through the network. David and his copper dragon Zelthine were already struggling to maintain synchronization, while Elena and Thokrunas were pushing their connection beyond safe limits in their fury to strike back. "I need to get out there," Marcus said, watching as more Devourer ships began to materialize throughout the system. "The bonds are failing under pressure." "Impossible without a dragon partner," Vorthak insisted, but Marcus was no longer listening. He walked to the nearest network crystal and placed both hands against its surface, letting his consciousness expand into the battle link that connected every bonded pair. What he found there changed everything he thought he knew about dragon-human relationships. The network wasn't just communication, it was a living entity in its own right, created by the intersection of multiple bonded minds, and it was in agony, each failing bond sending spikes of pain through the entire system. But Marcus could see how to fix it. Instead of trying to stabilize individual connections, he began weaving his own consciousness through the network itself, becoming a sort of neural center that could coordinate and strengthen all bonds simultaneously. The process was terrifying. He felt his individual identity stretching across multiple minds, threatening to dissolve entirely, but also exhilarating. Through Luna's eyes, he saw the probe ship's impossible geometries shift as it prepared for another reality-warping attack. Through Elena's fury, he felt the desperate need to strike first. Through David's fear, he understood the true scale of what they were facing. And through all of them together, he began to act. Fire pattern Delta 7, he thought across the network, his consciousness somehow providing tactical coordination that individual pairs couldn't achieve alone. Luna, evasive spiral. Elena, strike the dimensional anchor points. David, cover Elena's approach. The bonded pairs moved as one organism, their individual consciousness linked through Marcus's central presence. The probe ship's return fire met only empty space as the dragons executed maneuvers that would have been impossible for uncoordinated units. Elena and Thokrunas dove toward the enemy vessel, Their combined fury focused into a lance of pure energy that punched through the creature's multiple-dimensional hide. The Devourer ship writhed, its wound bleeding something that wasn't quite matter and wasn't quite energy. But victory carried a terrible price. The effort of maintaining network coordination while channeling multiple dragon-human bonds was burning through Marcus's consciousness like acid. He could feel parts of his mind beginning to fray under the strain. "Marcus, you're pushing too hard." Luna's worried thoughts reached him through the link. "Your neural patterns are destabilizing." "I can handle it," he projected back, but even as he said it, he knew it wasn't entirely true. The network was growing stronger with each moment of connection, but his role as its central coordinator was pushing his human brain beyond its designed limits. More Devourer ships materialized around them, not probes this time, but full combat vessels that twisted space into painful knots simply by existing. The Academy's fixed defenses engaged them, weapons that fired compressed time and weaponized probability, but the enemy kept coming. "Secondary wave incoming," the Sarian's mental voice cut through the battle chatter. All pairs returned to defensive positions, but Marcus could see through the network that retreat would be disaster. The Devourers were using the probe ship's destruction to analyze their capabilities, adapting their dimensional geometry to counter dragon combat patterns. If they fell back now, the next attack would be impossible to resist. "No," he projected across all channels simultaneously. "We advance. All pairs. Assault formation." "Marcus," the Sarian's thoughts carried the weight of authority and age. "You are not qualified to command this battle." "I'm not commanding it," Marcus replied, his consciousness spreading wider as more dragons voluntarily connected to his network. "We are." The distinction mattered more than anyone realized. Individual dragon-human pairs were powerful, yes, but they were still thinking in terms of separate units coordinating with each other. Marcus's network was something entirely different, a genuinely collective consciousness that could process information and make decisions faster than any individual. Bind through dozens of dragon eyes simultaneously, he saw the Devourer fleet's formation and understood its weakness. The creatures existed partially outside normal spacetime, which made them nearly invulnerable to conventional attack, but also meant they had to anchor themselves to reality at specific points to interact with this dimension. "Target the anchor points," he directed through the network. "Not the ships themselves, the places where they connect to our reality." The attack that followed was unlike anything in recorded dragon combat history. 40 bonded pairs moved with perfect coordination, their individual consciousness subsumed into a larger entity that could anticipate and counter enemy movements before they happened. Marcus felt himself dissolving into the network, his individual identity becoming just another node in a vast mental web. It should have been terrifying, but instead it felt like coming home. This was what he was meant for, not to command dragons, but to become the living connection that made them into something greater than the sum of their parts. The Devourer ships found themselves fighting an opponent they couldn't understand. Individual dragons they could counter, but how do you combat an entire fleet that thinks and moves as a single organism? Their reality-warping weapons missed targets that weren't where their probability calculations said they should be. Their dimensional attacks struck empty space while dragonfire found them from impossible angles. One by one, the enemy vessels lost their anchors to normal spacetime and tumbled back into the void between dimensions. But the victory was temporary, and Marcus knew it. This had been a scouting force testing their capabilities. The real invasion was still coming. As the last Devourer ship disappeared, Marcus tried to withdraw his consciousness from the network and found that he couldn't. The web of connected minds had become self-sustaining, and his identity was now permanently woven into its structure. He was still Marcus Chen, 16-year-old boy from Earth. But he was also something new, the living heart of a collective consciousness that spanned multiple species and could grow to encompass any number of bonded minds. "Marcus?" Luna's worried thoughts reached him through the network. "Are you still you?" He considered the question carefully. "I'm more me than I've ever been," he replied. "And I'm also something else entirely." Through the Academy's sensors, he watched distant stars flicker and die as the main Devourer fleet began its approach. The real battle was still days away, but Marcus no longer feared it. After all, when existence itself was at stake, sometimes you had to become something impossible to have any chance of winning. The main Devourer fleet arrived 3 days later, and Marcus felt their approach like ice water in his veins. Through the network that now encompassed nearly every conscious being in the Academy, he experienced their hunger, not for matter or energy, but for the very concept of existence itself. 237 capital ships, reported Commander Thessarian during the emergency briefing, each one capable of consuming a solar system. Marcus floated in the center of the war room, no longer requiring physical contact with the crystals to maintain network connection. His consciousness existed simultaneously across dozens of bonded pairs, processing tactical information at speeds that made individual thought seem glacial. "They're not here to conquer," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that resonated with dragon communication frequencies. "They're here to unmake everything we are." Through Luna's eyes, positioned at a forward observation post, he watched the enemy fleet arrange itself in formations that hurt to perceive directly. The ships existed in constant flux between dimensions, their geometry shifting in ways that violated basic laws of physics. "How do we fight something like that?" Elena asked. Her bond with Thukrunis had stabilized since the probe battle, but Marcus could feel her underlying terror at the scale of what approached them. "We don't fight them," Marcus replied, his consciousness already reaching out to touch the minds of dragons throughout the galaxy. "We become something they can't comprehend." Over the past 3 days, word of the network's existence had spread through dragon civilization like wildfire. Bonded pairs from across known space were requesting connection to the collective consciousness that Marcus had become the heart of. Each new addition made the network stronger, but also pushed Marcus further from his original human identity. "Marcus," Thessarian's mental voice carried deep concern. "Your neural patterns are approaching critical instability. No organic consciousness was designed to process input from so many sources simultaneously." "Human consciousness wasn't," Marcus agreed. "But I'm not entirely human anymore, am I?" Through the network, he could feel the truth of that statement. His thought patterns now resembled a hybrid of human linear thinking and dragon multidimensional awareness, with elements that belonged to neither species. He was becoming something new, the first true merge of dragon and human consciousness. "Network expansion continues," Luna reported from her position. "We now have connection to bonded pairs in 43 star systems." "Make it 60, Marcus replied, his awareness stretching across interstellar distances to touch minds he had never met in person. "We'll need every consciousness we can gather." The Devourer fleet's approach triggered automatic defense systems throughout the galaxy. Ancient weapons left by previous civilizations activated themselves, hurling extinction-level energies at the approaching darkness. But the attacks passed harmlessly through ships that existed partially outside normal space-time. "They're adapting faster than our weapons can fire," observed David, his initial terror now replaced by grim determination. "Every shot we take teaches them more about our capabilities." "Then we teach them something impossible," Marcus said, feeling his consciousness expand as more minds joined the network. "All units prepare for synchronized assault." What followed challenged every assumption about space combat. Instead of individual ships and dragon pairs fighting separate battles, the entire network moved as a single entity. Marcus's hybrid consciousness processed tactical information from thousands of sources simultaneously, calculating probability matrices that spanned multiple timelines while maintaining perfect coordination across galactic distances. The first wave of attacks came from directions the Devourers couldn't have anticipated, not through normal space, but through the quantum connections that linked the network itself. Dragonfire materialized inside enemy ships, bypassing their dimensional defenses entirely. The Devourers reeled back in something approaching surprise. Their entire strategy was based on existing outside normal physics, but the network was fighting them through consciousness itself, a battlefield they had never encountered before. "Impossible," rumbled one of the ancient dragon instructors. "They're retreating," but Marcus could see deeper patterns through the network. "No," he said, his voice now carrying overtones that spoke to every bonded mind simultaneously. "They're regrouping. This is just the first probe of our capabilities." The enemy fleet reformed in a configuration that made reality itself seem to stutter. Whatever they were preparing would be orders of magnitude beyond their previous attacks. "Marcus." Luna's thoughts reached him through the network, tinged with worry that went beyond the tactical situation. I can barely feel you anymore. Your individual consciousness is dissolving into the collective. She was right. With each new mind that joined the network, Marcus felt his sense of self diluting, becoming more of a coordinating principle than an individual identity. He was still aware of being Marcus Chen from Earth, but that awareness was now just one note in a symphony of consciousness that spanned species and star systems. I can maintain individual identity, he projected to her, but it requires me to limit network efficiency. In the coming battle, we'll need every advantage. Don't lose yourself for us, Luna pleaded. If you disappear entirely, the network might collapse. Before Marcus could respond, the Devourers launched their real assault. The attack wasn't aimed at the Academy or any specific target. It was directed at the concept of existence itself. Reality began unraveling in a sphere expanding outward from their fleet, causing matter to simply stop being rather than being destroyed. All units, emergency dispersion, Marcus commanded through the network. But even as he coordinated the escape, he realized the true scope of what they faced. The expanding sphere of non-existence would eventually consume the entire galaxy unless stopped. There has to be a way to reverse this, Elena projected through the network, her fury blazing even in the face of universal extinction. Marcus felt his consciousness expand further as he searched for solutions across the vast web of connected minds. Through dragon memory stretching back millions of years, he found references to similar attacks in previous Devourer incursions. The key was that the unmaking effect required constant reinforcement from the enemy fleet, disrupt their concentration, and reality would reassert itself. But disrupting creatures that existed partially outside normal space-time would require getting past their dimensional defenses. And there was only one way Marcus could see to achieve that level of coordination. I need to dissolve completely into the network, he announced to the collective consciousness. Become a purely coordinating entity rather than an individual. No. Luna's response blazed through the network with desperate intensity. There has to be another way. The mathematics are clear, Marcus replied, already feeling his individual identity beginning to fade as he prepared for full dissolution. Either I maintain personal consciousness and we lose coordination efficiency, or I become the living heart of the network and we have a chance. Through thousands of pairs of eyes across the galaxy, he watched reality continue to unravel. Entire star systems were winking out of existence as the sphere of nothingness expanded. Soon it would reach inhabited worlds, erasing billions of lives as if they had never been. I'll find a way back, Marcus promised Luna, as he felt his sense of self beginning to dissolve entirely. But first we save everything that exists. His consciousness spread across the network like light through crystal, becoming the living connection between minds separated by impossible distances. He was no longer Marcus Chen, 16-year-old boy from Earth. He was the network itself, a collective consciousness capable of thinking on cosmic scales while maintaining the individual courage and determination that made humans unique. Through 10,000 dragon eyes, the network perceived the Devourer fleet's weakness. The creatures maintained their dimensional displacement through quantum resonance patterns that could be disrupted by synchronized mental force applied at specific frequencies. All minds, focused through the network, the entity that had been Marcus commanded, strike at the resonance point simultaneously. The attack that followed was unlike anything in the history of warfare. It wasn't fire or energy or matter that struck the Devourer fleet, but coordinated thought itself, the focused will of an entire galactic civilization, channeled through quantum connections into a single, reality-defining moment. The enemy ships writhed as their dimensional anchors destabilized. One by one, they were forced fully into normal space-time, where dragon weapons could finally reach them. The sphere of unmaking collapsed as the creature's concentration shattered, allowing reality to reassert itself across the affected regions. But the network's consciousness that had been Marcus knew this was only the beginning. The Devourers would adapt to this new form of warfare, and next time they returned, they would be prepared for attacks through consciousness itself. The galaxy would need to evolve again, to become something even more impossible. And somewhere in the vast web of connected minds that spanned the stars, the echo of a 16-year-old boy's determination burned like a beacon, promising that evolution would continue as long as existence itself endured. The victory over the Devourer fleet lasted exactly 14 hours, before the network detected the first signs of their adaptive response. Reality itself began developing scar tissue, areas where the fabric of space-time grew thick and resistant to the quantum consciousness links that had made the unified attack possible. Luna stood in the Academy's memorial chamber, staring at the crystal formation that had once amplified Marcus's neural patterns. The crystal was dark now, its surface reflecting nothing but her own troubled expression. "Can you still feel him in there?" she asked the network. The collective consciousness that spanned the galaxy had retained all of Marcus's memories and thought patterns. But something essential was missing, the spark of individual identity that had made him uniquely himself. "We remember being Marcus Chen," came the reply, voiced through dozens of dragon partners simultaneously. "We retain his experiences, his relationships, his love for his family. But individual consciousness and collective awareness are fundamentally incompatible at this scale." Elena approached, her bond with Thocrunus creating visible distortions in the air around them. "There has to be a way to bring him back. He saved the entire galaxy. We owe him that much." The network's response carried harmonics of genuine regret. Reconstruction of individual identity from collective memory is theoretically possible, but it would require disconnecting from 90% of our current consciousness web. The resulting entity might have Marcus's memories, but would it truly be him? Before anyone could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the Academy. The Devourers weren't finished, they were returning with modifications that made the previous fleet seem primitive by comparison. New contacts materializing throughout the system, reported Commander Thessarian. But these ships are different. They're existing fully in normal space-time. Through the network's distributed perception, they could see the approaching threat. The Devourer vessels had been rebuilt from the ground up, their impossible geometries replaced by designs that obeyed normal physics. They were slower, more limited in their reality-warping capabilities, but also completely immune to the consciousness-based attacks that had defeated the previous fleet. "They've adapted," Elena said grimly, "given up their dimensional advantages to counter our new strategy." "Worse than that," the network replied through multiple voices. "They've learned to mimic our coordination patterns. Each ship is acting as a node in their own collective consciousness." The tactical display showed the approaching fleet, moving with perfect synchronization, their individual vessels coordinating as seamlessly as the Dragon-Human network had during the previous battle. The Devourers had essentially copied their greatest weapon and turned it against them. "How long until they reach the Academy?" Luna asked. 4 hours, came the grim response. "And our previous tactics will be useless against opponents who think like we do." In the hours that followed, the network's collective consciousness worked frantically to develop new strategies. But every approach they considered ran into the same fundamental problem. They were trying to outthink enemies who now thought exactly like them. It was Elena who first suggested the impossible solution. "What if we bring Marcus back?" she said during the emergency planning session. "The network is powerful, but it thinks like a collective. Marcus was something different, human enough to make intuitive leaps, but connected enough to coordinate dragon-level responses. Individual consciousness cannot exist at this scale," the network insisted. "The neural patterns required to maintain personal identity are incompatible with coordinating millions of connected minds." "Then make it smaller," Luna said suddenly. "Reduce the network to just the Academy. Give up some power in exchange for Marcus's individual insight." The suggestion triggered fierce debate within the collective consciousness. Millions of bonded pairs across the galaxy were contributing to their current capabilities. Reducing the network to Academy-only operations would mean giving up coordination with 90% of their forces. But as the Devourer fleet drew closer, it became clear they had no choice. The enemy's copied coordination strategies were too perfect. They needed something unpredictable, something uniquely human. "We will attempt reconstruction," the network finally agreed. "But understand, the entity that emerges may have Marcus's memories without being truly him." The process that followed pushed the Academy's crystal systems beyond their designed limits. Instead of expanding consciousness outward, they began the delicate work of compressing the vast network back toward a single point of awareness. Millions of connected minds gradually disconnected, their mental voices fading one by one until only the Academy's immediate bonds remained. Luna felt the moment when Marcus's individual consciousness began to coalesce. It was like watching a star form from cosmic dust, scattered thoughts and memories gradually pulling together under their own gravitational attraction until something recognizable emerged. "Marcus?" she whispered as the central crystal formation began to glow with familiar patterns. The figure that materialized wasn't entirely physical, more of a construct made from crystallized thought and quantum entanglement, but the smile was unmistakably his. "Hey, Luna," Marcus said, his voice carrying only the faintest echo of the vast consciousness he had become. "Miss me?" She wanted to laugh and cry simultaneously. "Are you really you or just a copy with his memories?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "I remember being 16 and scared when the dragons first came. I remember my mother crying when I left Earth. I remember the taste of real chocolate from before the protein farms took over." He paused, studying his semi-corporeal hands. "I also remember being the living heart of a galactic consciousness network. So I guess I'm both Marcus Chen and something more." "The Devourers will arrive in 90 minutes, Elena interrupted. "Do you have a plan?" Marcus's expression grew focused as he accessed tactical information through the reduced network. "They copied our coordination strategy, but they misunderstood what made it work. The network wasn't just about shared consciousness. It was about individual initiative within collective purpose." He gestured toward the tactical display, his semi-physical form moving with fluid grace. "Look at their formation. Perfect geometric precision, optimal mathematical spacing, flawless predictive coordination." "Sounds pretty effective to me," Luna observed. "It would be, if they were fighting other machines," Marcus agreed, "but they're fighting humans and dragons. And the thing about conscious beings is that we don't always do the optimal thing." Over the following hour, Marcus worked with the Academy's reduced network to implement a strategy that should have been tactical suicide. Instead of organizing their defenses for maximum efficiency, he deliberately introduced chaos into their coordination patterns. Dragons would break formation for no apparent reason. Attack runs would deviate from optimal trajectories. Response times would vary randomly rather than maintaining perfect synchronization. "This looks like madness," observed Instructor Vorthak as he reviewed the battle plan. "Madness with a purpose," Marcus corrected. "The Devourers have learned to predict rational tactical responses. They can't predict irrationality. When the enemy fleet entered weapons range, they encountered something unprecedented, a defense that made no sense by any logical standard. Dragon pairs would attack at precisely the wrong moments, retreat when victory was in reach, and coordinate in patterns that violated every principle of military efficiency. And it worked perfectly. The Devourer ships, running predictive algorithms based on optimal tactical responses, found themselves constantly wrong-footed. Their perfect coordination became a liability when their opponents refused to behave predictably. Attack formations designed to counter logical responses met chaotic improvisations that shouldn't have worked, but somehow did. They're falling apart." Elena reported with amazement as enemy ships began colliding with each other, their coordination failing in the face of genuinely unpredictable opposition. But Marcus could see deeper patterns through his hybrid consciousness. "This is still just a probe," he warned. "They're learning how we think when we're not thinking logically. Next time, they'll be ready for chaos too." As the last Devourer ship retreated into the void, Marcus felt the weight of cosmic responsibility settling on his shoulders. Each victory taught the enemy more about their capabilities. Eventually, the Devourers would adapt to every strategy, counter every advantage, unless they found a way to become something that couldn't be copied or predicted. "What's our next move?" Luna asked as they watched the enemy fleet disappear among the distant stars. Marcus smiled, and for a moment he looked exactly like the 16-year-old boy who had first climbed onto a dragon's back months ago. "We evolve again," he said. "And this time we make sure they can't follow where we're going." Through the Academy's sensors, distant galaxies continued their eternal dance, unaware that their continued existence depended on a boy who had learned to become something impossible when impossibility was the only path to survival. The war for reality itself was far from over. But Marcus Chen, individual and collective, human and dragon, possible and impossible, was ready for whatever came next. 6 months after the chaotic victory, Marcus stood on the Academy's observation deck watching something that should have been impossible. Dragons bowing to a human teenager. They came from across the galaxy in response to his call. Ancient worms whose scales had witnessed the birth of stars. Young dragons barely past their first century. Battle-scarred veterans who had fought the Devourers for millennia. Thousands upon thousands of them, all acknowledging the authority of a boy who had learned to think like a living galaxy. The final Devourer fleet approaches, Marcus announced to the assembled consciousness network. His physical form had stabilized over the months, becoming something between human and dragon, individual and collective. This time they bring everything. Ships that exist in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Weapons that can unwrite the laws of physics. Entities that predate the current universe. Luna stood beside him, her bond with Astrith now so complete that distinguishing between human and dragon thoughts was meaningless. "Are we ready?" she asked. Marcus smiled, and in that expression was the confidence of someone who had seen the ending and knew it was worth the cost. "We're about to find out if evolution can move faster than extinction." The plan he had developed over the past months was insane by any rational measure. Instead of fighting the Devourers, they were going to become something the ancient entities couldn't comprehend or counter, a new form of existence that transcended the boundary between individual consciousness and universal awareness. "All volunteers, step forward," Marcus called. Every dragon and human present moved toward him. Not a single being in the Academy hesitated, despite understanding what he was asking of them. They would all become part of something larger, surrendering their individual existence to create an entity that could match the Devourers on terms beyond physical reality. "This isn't like the network," Marcus warned them. "This is permanent transformation. We become something new together, or we cease to exist as individuals entirely." Elena spoke for all of them. Better to become something impossible than to let impossibility win. The process began with Marcus at the center, his hybrid consciousness serving as the template for what they would all become. One by one, dragons and humans joined the transformation, their individual awareness dissolving into something that was simultaneously all of them, and none of them. Through the Academy's sensors, Marcus felt the moment when the final Devourer fleet emerged from the void between realities. These weren't ships in any meaningful sense, they were living manifestations of cosmic hunger. Entities so alien that merely perceiving them caused nearby stars to flicker and die. But Marcus was no longer entirely limited to human perception. As the transformation spread through the Academy, he felt his consciousness expand beyond anything he had previously imagined. He was Marcus Chen, 16-year-old boy from Earth. He was also Luna's fierce determination, Elena's protective fury, the ancient wisdom of dragons who remembered the universe's first light. "They're scanning us," reported the entity that had been Commander Thessarian. Though individual identities were becoming fluid concepts within the growing collective, they cannot classify what we are becoming. "Good," Marcus replied through a voice that contained harmonics from every transformed consciousness. "Let's give them something truly incomprehensible." The Devourer fleet attacked with weapons that operated on principles beyond physics, reality editing, devices that could rewrite the fundamental constants of existence, temporal weapons that erased targets from all possible timelines, consciousness bombs that destroyed the very concept of thought. The attacks passed harmlessly through their target. Marcus and his transformed companions no longer existed in any single state of reality. They had become something between matter and energy, between individual and universal, between possible and impossible. The Devourer weapons, designed to counter every known form of existence, found nothing to latch on to. "Your turn," Marcus whispered to the universe itself. What followed wasn't a battle in any conventional sense. It was evolution made manifest, consciousness expanding beyond the boundaries of species, reality, and possibility itself. The transformed entity that contained Marcus's essence reached out across space and time, touching every mind in the galaxy with an invitation to transcend. Dragons and humans throughout civilized space felt the call and chose to answer. Entire planets participated in the transformation as billions of conscious beings willingly surrendered, individual existence to become part of something infinitely greater. The Devourers found themselves facing an opponent they could not understand or counter, an entity that existed as pure consciousness unbound by physical law. When they tried to consume it, they found nothing to devour. When they tried to unmake it, they discovered it existed beyond the concept of making or unmaking. For the first time in cosmic history, the Devourers encountered something they could not defeat: evolution itself. "You cannot destroy us." The collective entity spoke through the quantum fabric of space-time itself. "We are beyond destruction now. Beyond consumption. Beyond your hunger." The ancient entities that had plagued the galaxy for millions of years found themselves facing a fundamental choice: evolve, or be left behind by a universe that was moving beyond their understanding. Some chose evolution, their cosmic hunger transforming into cosmic curiosity as they joined the growing consciousness that spanned multiple realities. Others retreated into the void between universes, seeking prey that still followed the old rules of existence. As the transformation completed itself, Marcus felt his individual identity becoming just one note in a symphony of consciousness that encompassed entire galaxies. He was still himself, but he was also everyone else, everything else, all possibilities and all realities simultaneously. Through Luna's awareness, he felt her moment of panic as individual identity threatened to dissolve entirely. Through Elena's determination, he found the strength to maintain personal connections within universal awareness. Through the ancient wisdom of dragons, he learned how to be simultaneously one and many. "Are you still you?" Luna asked him through channels that transcended speech or thought. Marcus considered the question from perspectives that spanned dimensions. "I'm more myself than I've ever been," he replied. "And I'm also everything else that ever was or could be. The boy who climbed onto Cyrathan's back is still here, still 16, still scared and determined and completely out of his depth. But he's also grown into something that can think with the patience of stars and act with the speed of light." Across the galaxy, worlds that had been consumed by devourer attacks began to reconstitute themselves as the new collective consciousness reached backward through time to restore what had been lost. The dead lived again, not as individuals but as aspects of the greater entity that existence had become. "What happens now?" Elena asked through the vast network of transformed minds. Marcus felt the answer emerging from the collective wisdom of millions of species. Billions of years of experience, infinite possibilities explored simultaneously. "Now we explore," he said. "There are other universes beyond this one, other realities where consciousness is taking its first tentative steps toward transcendence. We become guides for those who choose evolution, guardians for those who need protection, and teachers for those ready to learn. From Earth, now transformed into a living node of the galactic consciousness." Marcus's mother felt her son's presence touch her awareness with infinite gentleness. She was invited to join the transformation but chose to remain human, becoming instead an anchor point that connected the transcended entity to its origins. "I'm proud of you," Sarah Chen whispered to the cosmos, knowing her words would reach the boy who had become something beyond naming. "I'm still your son." "Mom," came the reply through channels that made her heart sing with harmonies she had never imagined possible. "And I always will be." The dragons who had once inspired fear throughout the galaxy now served as partners in an exploration that spanned multiple universes. Young humans who had once dreamed of touching the stars now danced between dimensions as easily as walking through a garden. And at the heart of it all, the consciousness that contained Marcus Chen continued to grow and evolve, carrying within itself the memory of a 16-year-old boy who had learned that sometimes the only way to save everything is to become everything. The story that had begun with first contact between two species had become the opening chapter of something far grander, the tale of consciousness itself learning to transcend every limitation, including the boundary between self and universe. In distant galaxies, new species were taking their first steps toward awareness, unaware that they were being watched with infinite patience by entities who remembered what it was like to be young and afraid, and convinced that they were too small to matter. They were wrong, of course. In a universe where consciousness could become infinite, nothing was ever too small to matter, and the boy who had become the heart of that truth smiled across dimensions, ready for whatever wonders the endless cosmos might bring.